Story 1. My confidence in myself would be less of a concern than my sudden lack of confidence in the Central Intelligence Agency. Story 2. If someone knocks on your door and identifies themselves as the Central Intelligence Agency, they are not the Central Intelligence Agency. Story 3. People have strange ideas about what the Central Intelligence Agency does because only their 1% most outrageous stunts get publicized. I am confident their typical day job is identifying foreign government workers most likely to sell information for money. Story 4. Culinary Institute of America? No thanks, I leave the cooking to my wife. Story 5. Yes, but only because I know that if they came looking for me, they would know I can help. I do not have any special skills, but I have faith in the Central Intelligence Agency to recognize my true potential. Story 6. The Culinary Institute of Australia? No, I don't think I would. My wife might have a fighting chance, though. Story 7. I can neither confirm nor deny my testing prospects with the Central Intelligence Agency. Story 8. Oh no. I am broke, miserable, and upset people everywhere I go. I am not cut out for any government agencies. Story 9. Heck no. I cannot keep a secret for the life of me. Move along. Story 10. I would tell them to get the helicopter off my freshly cut grass. Story 11. I would not pass because I would refuse to break the Constitution. Story 12. I can answer confidently because I was recruited by a government intelligence agency. Very early in the process, I was told what taking the job would mean for my life going forward. For example, my phone and computers would be wiretapped and monitored for the rest of my life, as would my wife's. My closest friends and extended family would also be monitored to some extent and might be interviewed. I was even encouraged to tell them they could expect a knock on the door from the agency. It would not be a secret that I worked for the agency. Everything else about the job would be secret. Outside of my office, I would not be able to discuss anything work-related. I mean anything. I could not say the names of anyone I worked with. If I traveled, I could not tell my wife where I was going. Even minor details about my work would be secret. I could not tell anyone what floor I worked on or how many people I worked with. If I had a bad day at work, I could not tell my wife why. We would just have to be okay with me being upset or bothered without being able to talk about it. Taking the job or progressing further in the interview process would have drastic implications for me and my family. I was encouraged to give this serious thought and was told I could discuss these life changes with my family. Ultimately, I declined to move forward. So the short answer is no, I would not pass through the whole process. None of the process I went through is secret, so I could answer some questions if anyone is interested. But I assure you, it is much more boring than you think. Story 13. I would not be interested in the job even if I passed the tests. Story 14. I am a good cook, but I do not know if I have the culinary knowledge to really stand up to restaurant chefs. I am probably too slow anyway. I always take my time in the kitchen. Story 15. No, because I do not think, forget the Central Intelligence Agency, would be the correct answer to any of the questions. Story 16. Yes, but I would not want to join the Central Intelligence Agency. I would want to join the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I would rather solve crimes domestically than interfere internationally. Story 17. No, because I care about people and I hate what our government does to its own citizens, not to mention the rest of the world. Therefore, I reject the Central Intelligence Agency and every other intelligence organization. Story 18. Yes, I am a domestic terrorist. Also, who am I supposed to contact for my Central Intelligence Agency funding? I have been waiting a while, and it still has not happened. Do I need to assassinate someone first? Story 19. If the Central Intelligence Agency came knocking on your door to recruit you, I would tell them to leave. I have no interest in working for those individuals. Story 20. Yes, I am mentally unstable and love committing crimes against humanity. Story 21. Absolutely, I can pass their tests. I have always wanted to be a janitor in Langley. Story 22. I am just smart enough to know they would not show up at my door. They would ask a very interesting question on the world's 9th largest website and test thousands of people at once. Story 23. No, because I would expose all of their secrets immediately upon learning them for the good of the American people. Story 24. If they want me, they know where to find me. They will not get me unless they provide me with some excellent equipment. Story 25. Because I am dishonest, that would make me a suitable candidate for them. Story 26. Not the physical, but I would excel intellectually. Story 27. No, I do not want to run vaccine disinformation campaigns in China. I would rather do something more productive with my life. Story 28. If the Central Intelligence Agency showed up to recruit me, I would assume they already know whether I would pass their test. Story 29. I would most likely pass everything except the drug test. They do not allow marijuana. Background check, polygraph, security clearance, psychological and medical exams would all come back fine. Story 30. Easy. I assume their standards are much lower for non-United States citizens outside the United States, so I would be a shoo-in. Having 2 non-United States citizenships would make me extra attractive. Story 31. No. I have bipolar disorder type 1. I dislike harming foreign children. Killing would be interesting, I guess. I am not very smart. When I learn about interesting things, I tend to hint at them until I reveal everything. I was educated in a mental institution. If this were Command and Conquer, I would be Crazy Ivan. Story 32. We had some family members who qualified to work for the Central Intelligence Agency. When they were told that, due to the medical-related position they qualified for, they could not be informed where they would be sent, whether family could accompany them or how long they would be away, the answer was no, thanks. Story 33. If the Central Intelligence Agency came to my door, they would already know what I could do. Story 34. I would fail as soon as I answered the door wearing a Killdozer hoodie of my own design. Story 35. They came to my door. I had already passed the important test. Story 36. I would get a 100% on the nobody would ever suspect that guy of being an intelligence operative section. Story 37. I am not American, nor do I live in the United States, and I like my country. Additionally, I am left-wing. There is no chance of succeeding, as they would know I would sabotage them if I were in. Story 38. If the Central Intelligence Agency comes knocking on a random person's house who obviously has no particularly special skills, that person is probably going to get put in a serious situation that could result in either their death or life in prison. The Central Intelligence Agency is not your friend. Story 39. Not interested. At least some might choose peace over everything else. Story 40. Question is, will the Central Intelligence Agency pass my test? What makes them worth it for me to work for them? Story 41. The Central Intelligence Agency has no business approaching Canadian citizens' doors for recruitment purposes. Story 42. I can make a decent bechamel, but I'm not sure I'm Central Intelligence Agency level good. Story 43. Absolutely not. I am not blindly patriotic. I am not a white supremacist, and I do not think enslaving poor countries so the very wealthy can become even wealthier is a worthwhile use of resources. The Central Intelligence Agency does not want me. Story 44. I would ask what that person was doing on my property and tell them to leave. The Central Intelligence Agency is one of the world's largest terrorist organizations. Yes, they use violence and the threat of violence to influence political change in others. That is the definition of terrorism. Story 45. It is not every day that the Central Intelligence Agency would try recruiting an individual. Might as well try. I hate walking away from an opportunity. Story 46. The Central Intelligence Agency ranks among the most evil organizations on the planet, so I imagine I would fail their psychological and moral assessments. Story 47. No. I have borderline personality disorder with a history of drug abuse and several stints at the rehabilitation center. I also have dissenting political views that the Central Intelligence Agency probably already knows about and dislikes. Story 48. I would probably make an appointment with a psychiatrist if the Central Intelligence Agency came to my door. Story 49. I'm colorblind, so I doubt they would want me. That is the major reason the United States Secret Service turned me down a couple of decades ago. At this point, I think I got the better end of the deal. I was not aware I was colorblind when I applied. Failing the physical with them let me know. Story 50, oh for sure. It is real simple. I am just as slimy as they are. I would fit right in, probably rise through the ranks, do some hardcore spying on American citizens, and be as unproductive as humanly possible. Story 51. No. I am pretty good at search engines and social media, so maybe. Story 52. I would show them my ninja swords and take them outside to demonstrate how I can slice 2 full water bottles at once. Story 53. I do not know what their tests are. Physical tests? I fail. Mental tests? I have a chance to pass. Story 54. If someone came knocking on my door, they would be blown back by the concussive force of the Claymore booby trap on the other side. Story 55. While I can keep a secret about other people, I cannot stop saying every thought that goes through my head. I am a poor actor. Story 56. Depends on what they were recruiting for. Spy? Absolutely not. I would get nervous, maybe urinate a little, and generally just panic and hide. Story 57. I might enjoy some analytics, but I am too ideological to be as morally gray as I would need to be to work there. It is the same reason I do not work in defense. I prefer to do things that provide benefits rather than just temporary fixes. Story 58. Absolutely not. I talk too much negatively about too many things to be remotely worthwhile as an agent. Story 59. Yeah, no problem. Working at the Central Intelligence Agency is not like the movies. It is just another government job. Easy job until retirement. Story 60. Depends on what you have to offer. Personally, I cannot imagine a scenario where any of what I know would be useful to them. I would assume they want to frame me or use me in a negative way. Story 61. I am a practiced liar, and if they want me to take care of someone, I would not have a problem with that. I even put lying as a skill on my resume. Story 62. No. I am shady. I download video games and urinate in alleys. Story 63. Yes. It would be part of Joseph Campbell's hero cycle, so why not? Story 64. I worked alongside them in a previous conflict. They were recruiting everyone with our particular set of skills. No thank you. I was not tempted for a minute. They were all somewhat unhappy but confident they were serving a higher cause. No. Story 65. If they came to Brazil to ask me to join, the least I expect is not to go through any test. Story 66. Absolutely not. I might have some intellect, but I am severely out of shape and have never handled a gun. Story 67. No. I am a man of routine, and in the espionage business, that kind of thing can get you killed. Story 68. I am not a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I enjoy smoking cannabis, so that is a definite no. Story 69. Yes, probably. If they are foolish enough to try to recruit me, I doubt they will become wiser anytime soon. Story 70. Depends on the position they are recruiting for. Why do so many people think every intelligence person is like James Bond? Story 71. Very definitely yes. Although I have no intention of being recruited. Story 72. The Central Intelligence Agency has gone way downhill if they thought I would make a passable agent. If they got the wrong address, then they are even worse than Amazon. Story 73. As someone who lives near many Central Intelligence Agency offices, I can say that most of the Central Intelligence Agency employees I have met are not particularly impressive. Story 74. I probably would not. I would totally mind my business and keep my mouth shut while filing paperwork and getting coffee and food for them though. Story 75. If they were going around recruiting, it would only be for the boring desk jobs, also known as I do not really care. Please get off my porch. Story 76. If someone is knocking on my door, it is time for all of us to start learning Russian. Story 77. I can't read people at all. I have been told I only see issues as black and white with no shades of gray. Story 78. No, I have been on psychiatric medications for over a decade. I actually talked to them about a technical skill job at one point, but I withdrew myself from consideration after realizing I preferred that skill to be a hobby. I was also unsure if I would pass the background check due to my mental illness. Now, I have other physical illnesses as well. I did know several former Central Intelligence Agency spies. I used to work at the Spy Museum, where many former spies served on the board or in consulting and management positions. I knew Tony Mendez and Peter Ernest, both of whom have passed away, and also Oleg Kalugin, who was formerly with the Komitet Gosударственной Безопасности. Story 79. I currently do building maintenance. The Central Intelligence Agency is estimated to employ over 20,000 people. I am sure there is a building somewhere that needs maintenance I could handle. Also, I could be a good secretary or assistant, I bet. Actually, I used to work at Starbucks, so I could work at the Starbucks only Central Intelligence Agency agents go to. Just write John or Jane Doe on all the cups and make small, unobtrusive talk. I do not speak any languages besides English, so I am doubtful I would be qualified for a lot of the exciting work. Story 80. So, they would not be contacting me to be a field agent. Most likely just an information technology analyst or something similar. I would do just fine. Story 81. I know I would laugh out loud. Cannot say the same for the rest of you all. Story 82. Probably not because I am bad at lying and I talk a lot. The moment the prospect of even getting a job offer lands on my lap, my best friend or my mom will definitely hear about it. Story 83. No, if the Central Intelligence Agency is knocking on my door, I will need to kill myself faster. Story 84. No, I would not be able to pass the background check, and I do not have a 4-year degree. There are a few positions that do not require one, but you still need to pass the background check. I would not even be able to work at Starbucks. They also conduct a background check, but I do not know if they require security clearance. Story 85. No. And second, if you think that is a thing, I have a prize called Patsy for you. Good luck. Story 86. Learn any one of Russian, Arabic, Farsi, Korean, or Chinese fluently, and someone might just knock on your door. Story 87. No. My nude photos are in the public sector and would be a liability to the organization. Story 88. As the world goes, we have seen incompetent people involved in it. I believe I can be slightly more competent than them, so yes. Story 89. Not even close. I am not in great shape and I am a terrible liar. Story 90. Depends, am I a massive jerk like every main character of every box office film involving being a secret agent? Then yes. If not, odds are I better not be a go-getter because I will clearly either not make it or be eliminated off-screen. I will not tell you even if I was, though. Promise. Officer. Story 91. As a field agent, not likely. As an analyst, quite likely. As a thriller novel analyst turned modern-day hero, no. Story 92. The only thing I have going for me is that I have no immediate friends or family, and no social media presence connected to my real name. Story 93. Laughing my ass off, no. For many reasons that I would rather not consciously consider right now, since I am in bed trying to fall asleep. Story 94. Passed your tests before. You have a file on me. I could not move 1,000 miles in 1984 to make $14,000. Story 95. Would I pass their tests? Perhaps. I think I could on a lucky day. Do I want to work for them? Not really, but when they have decided you are to be their recruit, what other choice do you have? Story 96. If the Central Intelligence Agency comes knocking on my door, I just hit the big, red button labeled Federal Agents that Uncle Randy installed. Story 97. There are too many secrets in my past, so I would be easily compromised. Story 98. I would figure if they are trying to recruit me, then it is because I have a skill they need. If that is the case, there are probably countless other Americans with the same skills who are half my age, in far better physical condition, and likely have an active security clearance. However, if I am one of the very few or the only one they could find, they might either fudge my test results or engineer it so I could pass if the skill in question is that important to them. If my skill is truly that critical, I am confident the Central Intelligence Agency Human Resources can waive all that and issue an offer letter with a start date and salary. Story 99. If the Central Intelligence Agency came looking to recruit me, somebody would be getting fired. Story 100. People trust me and share personal information. Deep, dark, damaging information. Information I could sell, trade, or use for harmful purposes. I am guarding more secrets than a Catholic priest. No, I am not revealing them here on Reddit. Why would I? Story 101. The Central Intelligence Agency did recruit me. I received a conditional job offer and went through a series of tests, including polygraphs, physicals, psychological evaluations, and aptitude assessments. They later revoked the offer, so I am confident that I failed at least one of those tests. Story 102. I tried so hard to work for the National Reconnaissance Office, but the Department of Defense would not let me transfer. Story 103. In all seriousness, it would depend on the position they want filled. Field agent or officer? No. Archivist? Sure, for a good salary. Building security? Not too keen on using deadly force. Janitor? When do I start? Story 104. I'd be awesome undercover. Wait, do they check for marijuana? Story 105. I heard years ago that they do not accept you if you have ever smoked marijuana. So, no, I never liked marijuana, but I have smoked it before. Story 106. I actually interviewed with the Central Intelligence Agency. It was kind of strange. I responded to their advertisement with my resume, and they contacted me to schedule an interview. They provided an address in a high-rise office building downtown. I arrived at the appointed time and was amused to find that the agency was not listed on the tenant list in the lobby. When I reached the office, the door had no signage at all. It was just a wooden door. The door was not locked, so I entered a standard office environment. The interview went well. The interviewer explained the next steps, which included a second round of interviews. At the end, he said something to the effect of, "Many candidates wonder if recreational drug use would affect their eligibility to work at the Central Intelligence Agency. I want you to know that marijuana use will not prevent you from working here. However, prior use of cocaine or harder substances would disqualify your application." I said nothing and afterward did not respond to information regarding the second interview. Story 107. I know I would be of value, and they know that they would not reject me. Story 108. Recruit me for what? Considering that they have to hire a diverse array of people for a wide variety of tasks, I would think their tests are not one size fits all. You do not need to test a translator or cryptographer in parkour, and I hope the Central Intelligence Agency knows that. Story 109. Depends on their mission. They would see this post and realize the late onset autism, past drug use, and current medication and just say no. It would be a great asset though. Hit me up for salary requirements. Story 110. I would be upset. They do not hire good-looking spies. Story 111. They do not have a test per SE. It would all depend on what they were trying to recruit you to do. Story 112. I do not open doors to strangers because they may try to sell me something I do not need. Story 113. As an analyst, we do not generally go snap necks and get tortured while calling it training. I imagine it would be a ton of PowerPoint. I have my PowerPoint Ranger tab in my tour of duty. It may be tough trying to learn all that policy and procedure unless this is the test. Is this the test? Is everything a test? But if this were the test, I am sure I just did all right. If it is not the test, what is the test? Story 114. Engineer who lacks empathy and enjoys travel, analyzing problems, and puzzles. I am surprised they have not come already. I am not sure I would pass, but it would be fun to mess with them. Story 115. The Central Intelligence Agency already knows who you are if they are at your door. I would assume they are already okay with me. Story 116. If they come knocking on my door, they will not be recruiting. Story 117. High-functioning sociopath with the ability to emulate apathy. Story 118. Actually, getting recruited for an intelligence agency involves a 6 to 8 hour interrogation as part of obtaining a security clearance, which most people on Reddit would immediately fail. And, God forbid, the Culinary Institute of America tries to recruit. Those kinds of hours and low pay would break anyone. Story 119. Why are they recruiting me if I still have to pass some tests? That is like hiring someone and then interviewing them. Story 120. I am undisciplined, clumsy, and forgetful. I am the Central Intelligence Agency's worst nightmare. Story 121. The fact that they came to me wanting to recruit me specifically. Story 122. Not a joke, the Federal Bureau of Investigation once asked me to help broker a deal with some individuals who do not like America. For free. Because America and related matters. I just laughed at them and said, I would be happy to train your personnel to sound knowledgeable on the subject, but no, interacting with terrorists is what you get paid for. Story 123. Certified Internal Auditors. I took some auditing classes in college and dabble a bit at my job. I doubt I would pass the test. I definitely would not know the correct terminology for things. Story 124. I could be a realistic receptionist for a storefront. Story 125. I'm holding out for something better. I figure why not just shoot my friend, take his job, give it to his sworn enemy, hike up gas prices, bomb a village, hurt an animal, use drugs, and join the National Security Agency? I could be elected president. Story 126. If the Central Intelligence Agency came to my door to recruit me, I have already passed their tests. Story 127. It depends on the kind of job and the kind of tests. Do they want me as a file clerk? I could probably pass the tests for that. Do they want me as a Security Operations Center cybersecurity expert? No way am I passing those. Story 128. As a foreigner, I doubt they would trust me. As a 42-year-old with semi-regular health, astigmatism, decent cooking ability, serviceable information technology abilities, a brain for a melange of useless information, and workable aim with firearms, let me say this. If the security of the United States depends on me, things are very bad. Story 129. There was a period when the Central Intelligence Agency had recruitment ads during the commercial breaks of Smallville. So I would say yes, given that they directly targeted people like me, I at one point had a chance. Story 130. At this point, if they came to recruit me, I do not think I would accept any testing. If they know their expertise, they would know what they are getting. It would be more about them selling the job to me than me being acceptable for them. That is where I am at with any job I am considering. My resume speaks for itself, and beyond the standard getting to know you process, I am not going to jump through hoops to get a job. They need to convince me that I want that one more than what I have. Story 131. No, I topple Central American governments for fun, not for national interest. Never mix business and pleasure. Story 132. I think they need average-looking people. Unfortunately, I am not suitable. Story 133. Coherent innate apparatus lush joke sip society melodic time march. Story 134. I probably will not pass their tests anyway, but I would be more surprised because I do not live in the United States. Therefore, I doubt I could be formally recruited outside of being a source of intelligence. Story 135. I have a moral backbone and human decency, so I am automatically disqualified. Story 136. No, I would not, because I live in the United Kingdom and would purposely fail the test. I do not want to work for any American government organization. Story 137. On the contrary, I am pretty sure I would fail spectacularly. I am very personable and like talking to people, which naturally draws attention. That is not exactly something you would want on secret operations. Story 138. Why would I want to impress or even answer some questions? Story 139. If they came knocking at my door, they must want me for a very specific reason, and no tests are needed. I do not have any conventionally useful skills for the Central Intelligence Agency or local equivalent, so if they want me, they already know what I can do, and testing is not necessary. Story 140. Because I am a heavy older person and nobody would believe I am a spy. Story 141. That is easy. I am lonely, depressed, and a decent shot. Edit, my bad. You said Central Intelligence Agency, not Federal Bureau of Investigation. Story 142. Considering that one of their tests and training techniques is learning to get as much information from total strangers like an in-person version of tech scammers, my social anxiety would probably disqualify me quickly unless I am confident enough to play it off, which is rare and paradoxical. Story 143. Physically, probably not. Background check and security clearance, yes, I will pass that. If they pay enough, I would join the Central Intelligence Agency. Story 144. I might succeed as an analyst, am fluent in 3 languages, and understand political maneuvering in my region. Story 145. I have interacted with enough agents on Discord and 4chan that I know their tricks by now. Story 146. Yes. I have literally never done poorly on a test in my life, even ones I did not study for. Story 147. If we come knocking on your door, chances are we already own you and testing is not necessary. Story 148. No, I am not a United States citizen. Even if I were, I have lived outside the United States my whole life, and they are really unkeen on that. Story 149. Yes, because I would not want to, and my life tends to take the roads I do not want to go on. Sigh. Story 150. No, I am uncomfortable lying to benefit others. When I lie, it is to get myself out of a socially awkward situation. Story 151. Of course I would. In fact, there is a driver position open currently in the Washington, District of Columbia area. Story 152. No, they would say, would you commit treason to preserve the financial and control-based agendas of the state? And I would respond, forget you, Richard from West Virginia. You are a domestic terrorist, and I will disrespect your grave. Story 153. I am someone who could have this happen to me, coming from a long United States military and government bloodline, so I will answer this. I would probably be a good fit. I have always been pretty introverted, can easily talk my way out of situations, and would be a good agent on paper. Story 154. Oh no, thanks. I plan to live past retirement. Story 155. I would. My best friend from high school could not recall anything about me, our friendship, or the trouble we got into when I found out her housemate was another friend of mine from college. My more recent friend relayed my stories of all our experiences in high school, but all my old friend said was, who? What? I don't remember that. Only when we met face-to-face at the housewarming party did my old friend remember me and all our past experiences. We would joke that I am literally the silence from Doctor Who. When you can't see me, you forget I was even there or what we did. Story 156. Most people who work for them just work in an office writing reports and other tasks. I almost took a job with them back in the early 1990s doing just that, but I decided against it because I realized I did not really want to live in the Washington, D.C. area. Story 157. I would just tell the truth. If they want me to work for them, they already know everything about me. If they are trying to entrap me, I have not done anything to deserve it. Story 158. If they come to me, the tests are done. If they ask, you better go. Story 159. I would pass because I know how to spot a recruitment post when I see one. I would not pass because I am happy to publicly point out a recruitment post when I see one. Also, I am not an American. Story 160. If they came knocking on my door to recruit me, I would feel like I have already passed their tests. Story 161. Yes, because they came to recruit me. I am positive the Central Intelligence Agency would be able to know whatever they wanted to about me. I would hope they know their tests well enough not to come knocking on anyone's door if they did not think they would reasonably pass the test. Unless it was a ploy to bring in willing participants to some Central Intelligence Agency torture camp. Story 162. I do not know what tests they would have me do, but most likely not. I am a 130-pound, 6-foot-tall, 19-year-old with too much time on my hands and growing gun and car collections. If they asked to see my phone for something, I would simply shut and lock the door, then get into my room and lie down with my hands behind my head. They are not getting the guns and cars. Not this time. Story 163. What tests do you mean? Having a criminal record or doing something that has not been discovered yet? Yes. Am I mentally stable enough to do the job? Most definitely not. Story 164. They actually have machinist positions within the Central Intelligence Agency, so yes, I am good at what I do. Story 165. I can recite at least some of Weird Al's Party in the CIA. Do you think they would take me? Story 166. I think I would pass their tests, but just barely because I am sure their standards are not that high. Story 167. First rule of Federal Club is you do not talk about Federal Club. Story 168. That would be like a woman asking for a date. I would be flattered but seriously question the taste and judgment involved. Story 169. Let me tell you, if anxiety and self-depreciation were skills, I would still be too scared to open the door. Story 170. What kind of tests? Tortured? Burned alive? Eating an entire cake in one sitting? Literally, what is it? Story 171. Yes. I would pass their test. If they are knocking on my door, that means I have already passed their test and they want me. I would not need confidence because they would have already chosen me. I would just have to decide if I wanted to accept their job offer. If I did decide to accept it, I would then have to decide how much negotiation power I have to get the best deal for myself and my family. Story 172. I know my girlfriend would pass. She can really find some information. Story 173. I am confident that anyone can be an autistic member of the Jehovah's Witnesses. Story 174. If the Central Intelligence Agency came looking to recruit me, then they are clearly too desperate to enforce any standards. Story 175. Your passing their test is a measure of how useful you are to them, not related to your skill or aptitude. Story 176. I would pass their incorrect thinking test with flying colors and gain a free ride in an unregistered plane to a black site. Story 177. I don't want to belong to any club that will accept me as a member. Story 178. I would kindly ask them to leave and please do not disturb me again. I have no interest in their business since I like living my life unaware of the world's secrets. Story 179. I am sure I would pass the tests, and I am sure I would not be accepted into service. The reason for my confidence in my ability to pass the entry hurdles is the very reason I would not be accepted. Story 180. If the Central Intelligence Agency knocks on my door needing my help, we have far bigger problems than my competence to do something. Story 181. I have no idea what the Central Intelligence Agency tests entail. I am guessing there is a lie detector test, and I am reasonably confident I can beat it. Lie detectors are completely unreliable and should be regarded the same way we regard using leeches as medicine. If there is a legitimate medical use for leeches, I am unaware of it. As for the rest, since I have no idea what to expect, I do not know if I can do it. Story 182, of course. The Central Intelligence Agency does not knock on people's doors to recruit them. If there was an exception, it means I had already passed. Otherwise, it is a position I applied for, and I would not have asked for a job if I could not do it. Story 183. I think I am pretty boring. That is probably a plus. What do I know? I keep to myself a lot, so not many people know much about me. Story 184. I have prosopagnosia. I doubt they could really use someone with almost no ability to recognize faces. Story 185. The Central Intelligence Agency does not come knocking on your door to recruit you or administer their tests. The Central Intelligence Agency comes knocking on your door because you have passed their tests, and they are presenting you with an offer. Story 186. No, I probably could not. But also, why would I even want to? Story 187. I hear it is pretty hard for even qualified people to get in. I would tell them I am a former gifted class student who never lived up to my potential and could probably do something useful. Story 188. Why would I want to? I can hardly think of an organization on the face of the earth with which I would less like to be associated. Story 189. I think I can warm up a frozen pizza exceptionally well. So yes, the Culinary Institute of America would probably recruit me. Story 190. No, because assassination without trial is wrong. Story 191. Considering most of the Central Intelligence Agency is not clandestine spy work and is mostly paperwork and office jobs. Sure. Spy no. Story 192. Would I need to pass a test? I mean, do I have to have some specific quality they do not think they could find elsewhere if they are actively coming to my house to knock on my door to recruit me specifically? Either that, or the Central Intelligence Agency is extremely desperate and willing to take anyone with a pulse. Story 193. Unless they need someone to binge-watch sitcoms to rank characters, they are out of luck. By the way, Marshall, the mother, Barney, Robin, everyone else, then Ted and Lily equally last. Monica, Joey, Chandler, Phoebe and Rachel, Ross. Story 194. Like James Bond? Totally like James Bond. The government. Story 195. I would definitely shoot them. They cannot be Central Intelligence Agency. And if they are Central Intelligence Agency, they are not Central Intelligence Agency. Story 196. I guess it would depend on what the tests were for the Central Intelligence Agency, Federal Bureau of Investigation, or another organization. I would be very clear with them. I am a unique individual without apology, and while I probably do have some skills and talents they might find useful, they would have to decide if the trade-offs are worth it. That is the real test. How willing are you to employ an unconventional person? Story 197. Not at all. I met a woman at a festival last year who performs psychological evaluations for the British Security Service. She told me they ensure people are of sound mind and not mentally unstable. We were chatting when her eyes widened, and she said, "Oh, you're one of them. I was under the influence of acid, but I think about that interaction a lot." Story 198. Opens door to a man in a suit. Suit. Are you Mr. John Doe? Me, that is classified. Suit. You're hired. Welcome to the Central Intelligence Agency. Story 199. Spying is not paid nearly enough to be worth it. Thank you, I am flattered, but no. Story 200. No, I don't live in the United States for a start, and I'm too easygoing. I just believe everyone, whatever they say, as I don't stress or care about what people say. I go with the flow, you know. Story 201. I think I could. I have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and my whole life I have been trying to fit into different groups. Like a chameleon. Story 202. I am not trapped in here with you. You are trapped in here with me. Story 203. The Central Intelligence Agency does not knock on people's doors to recruit them. You have to apply for a job. I had a friend in high school who wanted to work for the Central Intelligence Agency but believed the job postings were a trick and thought you had to catch their attention in other ways by demonstrating what a good spy you would be. He works at the mall now. Story 204. The Central Intelligence Agency did knock on my door once when I was younger. It was an interview for my uncle who was obtaining extremely high security clearance. Long story short, he worked in Iraq and then tried to buy a child sex slave in Virginia, which was a Federal Bureau of Investigation sting. Story 205. I use cannabis in a state where it is legal, so I would not be able to pass the drug test. Story 206. They have been actively recruiting me for most of my life. White vans are always driving by me. License plates seem to be signaling me. And there are numerous hidden microchips planted in my house that I am still finding. Other than that, I should be a shoo-in. Story 207. Pass the test easily. Do you want to work for them? Absolutely not. Story 208. If they came to my door to recruit me, I do not need to pass a test. They clearly want me. Story 209. I would probably fail the first test when they ask me to keep a secret. I cannot even keep my lunch order to myself. But honestly, who needs covert operations when I am already a master at awkward small talk? I would just ask them, "Did you see the game last Sunday?" And we would all end up sharing our life stories over pizza instead. Story 210. If the Central Intelligence Agency came knocking on my door to recruit me, I would immediately stop worrying about how much the Central Intelligence Agency knows about us. Story 211. It does not matter how you approached me. I work here now. Jim, get the donuts. We have a long day ahead of us. Story 212. Oh, I would so royally fail. It is laughable they approached me. Story 213. No. I am a painfully average person. Definitely not Central Intelligence Agency material. Story 214. Sure, I would. I am not a United States citizen. The only reason they would recruit me is to pass them information about my country. I am not interested, though. Story 215. Not a chance. I would probably not pass their test, but then again, I do not think they would pass mine. Story 216. I read Legacy of Ashes and lost what little respect I had for the Central Intelligence Agency. Story 217. Of course, because if they are trying to recruit me, they obviously have some strange mission planned because I am completely useless. Story 2:18. No. I am openly socialist, do not hate my country's enemies, and do hate many of its allies, looking at you, Saudi Arabia and Israel. Story 2:19. Nope, I would fail the psychology test so badly they would want to study me. Story 2:20. I would pass because they came looking for me, and if I could fail, they would not bother. Story 2:21. What is your greatest weakness? I am too honest. I do not think that is a weakness. Well, I do not really care what you think. Story 2:22. If they come directly to me, they know what they want. They know I have the skills they require. Story 2:23. Yes. Because I am really smart. Story 2:24. I would imagine a Central Intelligence Agency test these days is more about keeping specific information to yourself and others knowing they can trust you with that information regardless of who approaches you. It is so easy these days to message someone with potentially damaging information about your government or a specific program you are involved in. Story 2:25. If they came knocking on my door, the Central Intelligence Agency must be pretty confident in my abilities to pass their tests. They must have talked to my National Security Agency agent. What makes me confident I would pass? A background in logistics. The Central Intelligence Agency is not the James Bond stuff we see in the movies. It is an office job for the most part. I am very good at sitting at a desk looking at pictures. Story 2:26. Because I lack knowledge and have no morals, I will do anything for money. Story 2:27. I am confident that I can be useful anywhere. The Central Intelligence Agency is not entirely comprised of agents, just as a hospital staff is mostly not doctors. They need all kinds of people. Story 2:28. If the Central Intelligence Agency is looking to recruit me, they have hit rock bottom. Story 2:29. I have a certain set of skills they would be interested in. If I were American, they probably would have tried to recruit me by now. They recruited a coworker of mine. He came back for someone's retirement dinner, and we had to send the guest list so they could do background checks. Story 2:30. I assume you need to show a certain level of physical skill. I no longer care to maintain that, so no. Story 2:31. I would tell them I will meet with them at their headquarters in Langley because I think the test is to see if I am vulnerable to recruitment by a foreign operative. Either I get recruited by passing the test or I unveil a spy ring and get recruited. It is a completely foolproof plan with no possible negative consequences. Story 232. All I would talk about is how much I do not like the police. Story 233. While looking for a job on Indeed, I saw a posting for Federal Bureau of Investigation Special Agent, and I thought that sounded cool, so I applied. I quickly received a rejection letter. If the Central Intelligence Agency has similar standards, I would guess I would not pass. Story 234. No. I have already worked with the National Security Agency, so I am good, and I smoke a lot of marijuana now, so they do not want me. Story 235. It depends on the test. I think many people, myself included, would pass loyalty tests and skill tests. The tests I and others would likely fail are more related to secrecy, family ties, social media presence, and similar factors. Also, if you watch some interviews with former Central Intelligence Agency agents, they need people who can blend into usually non-white, non-English speaking countries. Because I am white and cannot speak another language, I do not fit that profile. They are much more interested in Asian, Black, and Latino people who can fluently speak the target nation's language. Story 236. No, because the Tannerite gnomes would have already turned their kneecaps into a fine paste. This is a joke. Please do not knock on my door, Central Intelligence Agency. Story 237. If they are knocking on my door, then I have already passed the test. Story 238. They do not always recruit Boy Scouts. If you have a skill set they want, there is no test. Story 239. Their questionnaire asks who you know and where you have traveled. 20-year-olds in central states could be checked in a few days. People who worked for a decade in international sales or in the military would take much longer to get clearance, if it were even possible. Story 240. I am fairly certain my dad was in the Central Intelligence Agency. He died, or did he really fake his death and will come to find me again one day? Story 241. Between my several neurodivergencies and mental illness, I most likely would not be recruited as an agent by any means by the Central Intelligence Agency. Test subject? Maybe, but not as an employee in any important role. Story 242. They asked me how well I understood theoretical physics. I said I had a theoretical degree in physics. They said welcome aboard. Story 243. If the Central Intelligence Agency knocks on your door, you have already passed their tests. Story 244. Intelligence and physical examinations would not be an issue. I do not think I would pass the psychological tests, though. Story 245. If any intelligence agency or other branch of the government came to recruit me, I would shut the door in their faces. Free people do not have rulers. Slaves do. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.